He thought he'd destroyed me when he took everything. The house, the cars, the savings, even the furniture. My lawyer begged me to fight. Instead, I smiled and told her to let him have it all. Everyone thought I'd gone crazy. But only I knew what he was really taking. I never imagined the end of my marriage would begin on a Tuesday morning in a courtroom that smelled of old paper and cold air. Yet there I was, sitting across from the man I had spent 12 years building a life with, watching him adjust his expensive watch as if he were preparing for a business deal instead of dismantling our family. His lawyer whispered something to him, and he nodded with the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. Then he rose from his seat, buttoned his jacket, and delivered the sentence that would silence the entire room. "I want everything," he announced. "The house, the cars, the business assets. Everything except the custody of our son." A quiet gasp rippled through the small courtroom. My lawyer jerked her head toward me, eyes wide with disbelief as if she expected me to collapse or explode. Instead, I simply stared at him. This man who once promised to love me, now standing there like a stranger negotiating the terms of a hostile takeover. His voice was steady, rehearsed, almost proud. "She can keep her personal items, of course," he added as if he were offering me a consolation prize. "But I want full control of everything else we built." My lawyer leaned toward me urgently. "We can fight this. You don't have to agree. You can win easily." But I didn't answer her. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't even blink. I just stared at him, watching the arrogance settle in his smile, watching how he smoothed his tie with a confidence he hadn't earned. For a moment it almost felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. But then the judge asked me directly, "Do you wish to contest your husband's request?" The entire room leaned in. My lawyer braced herself. Even his lawyer paused, pen hovering over his notes. I inhaled slowly. And then I said the words no one expected. "No. Let him have it." My lawyer whipped toward me. "What? No, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I whispered. A heavy silence swallowed the room. His lawyer smirked, but my husband, he didn't. He looked startled for a moment, confused even, as if he'd prepared for war but found no one on the battlefield. "You're agreeing?" he asked. "Yes," I said calmly. "If he wants everything, he can have everything." The judge blinked slowly, tapping her pen against the stack of documents, clearly taken aback. My lawyer kept whispering frantic arguments, but I didn't hear her. My eyes were locked on the man who thought he had beaten me. Because what he didn't know, what no one in that courtroom knew, was that what he was asking for wasn't just assets. It was also everything tied to them. Everything hidden beneath them. Everything he had done behind closed doors. And by insisting on taking it all, he had just agreed to take all of that too. I folded my hands in my lap and smiled. He thought he'd won. But he had no idea what he was really taking. The news spread faster than I expected. By the time I stepped out of the courthouse, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Texts, missed calls, voicemails piling up like debris after a storm. I ignored every notification and walked toward my car, each step echoing with the quiet certainty I'd carried for months. But certainty, I soon learned, was not contagious. By evening, the whispers had already begun. My best friend Lila showed up at my doorstep with a grocery bag full of comfort snacks and a face full of panic. "Tell me you didn't really give him everything," she pleaded the moment I opened the door. "Please tell me the judge misunderstood. Please tell me you're appealing." I poured her a glass of water. "I'm not appealing." She stared at me like I had spoken in another language. "You're letting him have the house, the business, the cars, the accounts, all of it." I nodded. She dropped onto the couch, covering her face with her hands. "Oh God. Everyone's talking about it. They think you're in shock. They think you're broken." Broken. The word hung in the air like dust. I sat beside her quietly, not denying it, not confirming it, just letting the silence settle. The next day my coworker Jenna cornered me in the office break room. "I heard what happened," she said, lowering her voice like she was relaying a classified secret. "If you need a place to stay, my aunt rents out a basement apartment for cheap. And if you need a shoulder to cry on..." I held up a hand gently. "I'm not homeless, Jenna. And I'm not crying." She blinked. "But, you gave him everything." "Yes," I replied. Her expression softened into pity, the kind that feels like a slow bruise. "You don't have to pretend you're okay. But I wasn't pretending. I simply didn't explain. And then there were the others. The neighbors who watched me pull into the driveway with narrowed eyes, whispering behind fences. The distant relatives who called only to gasp theatrically. The acquaintances from my son's school who sent me long paragraphs about staying strong, as if I were a wounded soldier returning from battle. Even my own sister Maya called late at night. "I'm not judging you," she said cautiously. "But why would you let him walk away with everything? Why didn't you fight?" Because this wasn't surrender. This was strategy. But I couldn't tell her that, not yet. So I simply answered, "Sometimes it's better to let someone take what they think they want." She sighed heavily, convinced I had lost my mind. Everyone was convinced. Everyone except me. Because while they saw a woman giving up her life, I knew I was clearing the path for something much larger. There was a time when Ethan, my husband, was the kind of man people admired. Hardworking, charming, the type who remembered birthdays and brought home flowers, just because. In the early years of our marriage he used to kiss my forehead every morning before work and whisper, "We're building something beautiful, you and I." And for a long time I believed him. But change doesn't come crashing down all at once. It creeps in quietly, like a shadow that grows longer with each passing day. It began subtly. A late night at work here, a cancelled weekend plan there. He became glued to his phone, angling the screen away when I walked by. His laugh, once warm, turned sharp and hollow like he was humoring a joke meant for someone else. At first I blamed stress. His business was growing fast, demanding more of him. But it wasn't long before stress turned into secrecy. He started locking his office door, leaving early without saying where he was going, and coming home smelling faintly of cologne he didn't wear around me. I tried to ignore it. I tried to be patient. But one night the truth slipped out. It was 1:30 a.m. when he stumbled in, whispering into his phone as he tiptoed upstairs. He didn't see me sitting in the darkened living room. He didn't see the way my heart clenched when I heard him say, "She suspects nothing. Just a few more months." He went silent the moment he saw me. "You're awake?" he muttered. I nodded slowly. "Who were you talking to?" He rubbed the back of his neck, his eyes darting to the hallway. "Work stuff." "Work stuff at 1 in the morning?" I asked. He sighed. "You're always so dramatic." And just like that, the argument spiraled. Not because I pushed, but because he did. He accused me of being insecure, paranoid, ungrateful. He claimed I didn't support his dreams, even though I'd been the one quietly holding up the foundation of our life. It was in that moment I realized something had changed in him. And not in a small way. Soon after, I found the first piece of evidence. A receipt tucked into his jacket pocket. Dinner for 2 at a restaurant far too expensive for work meetings. And then there were the unexplained withdrawals, cash missing from our joint accounts, and a string of charges tied to hotels I'd never visited. Still, I didn't confront him. Not yet. I needed to understand the full picture. What was he planning? Why the secrecy? What did a few more months mean? Over time, the pieces formed a clear, ugly truth. He wasn't just leaving me. He was preparing to strip me of everything before he did. He met with lawyers behind my back. He moved assets without telling me. He told mutual friends that I was unstable, planting seeds for the outcome he wanted. He even started grooming our son, telling him subtle lies to turn him against me. And then came the moment that sealed his fate. I overheard a voicemail he forgot to delete. A woman's voice, soft, confident, and far too familiar with him, saying, "Once you get everything from her, we can finally start fresh. Don't back down." That was it. That was the moment the marriage ended. Not the day in court. Not the day he demanded everything. The real ending came the night I realized he wasn't just betraying me emotionally. He was betraying me financially, legally, strategically. And he thought he could get away with it. He thought I would break. He thought I would fight blindly. He thought I wouldn't see what he was truly taking. He was wrong. Ethan always believed he was the smart one in the marriage. He loved telling people that he handled the big decisions, while I managed the little things. Finances, paperwork, contracts, he never bothered with any of it. He said numbers bored him. He said details were my thing. He said I was better at the administrative stuff. And I let him believe that. Because the truth was far bigger than he ever realized. Before I married him, before I became a full-time mother, I had a career. A real one. Not the small bookkeeping job he liked to dismiss whenever he wanted to feel superior. I had a degree in forensic accounting. I spent 8 years working for a private investigation firm, tracking financial fraud, building legal cases and untangling money trails for attorneys. I knew how to read bank statements the way some people read novels. I knew how to follow transactions, identify red flags, uncover shell accounts and interpret tax filings. But Ethan never asked about my past. He never cared. He assumed the world started the day he met me. So when he began hiding money, moving assets, shifting funds from our joint accounts into places he thought I'd never discover, he didn't know he was leaving fingerprints everywhere. He didn't know I could spot irregularities in a heartbeat. He didn't know I had the training to track every missing dollar. He didn't know he wasn't the only one preparing. He had forgotten, or perhaps never knew, that I had once helped put a man in prison for doing the exact things he was doing. And the most ironic part? He used my own organizational system to commit his deception. The folders I created. The spreadsheets I built. The passwords I set. He thought he was being clever. He thought hiding money under miscellaneous business expenses was genius. He thought opening a second credit card under our business name would go unnoticed. He thought cash withdrawals wouldn't matter. But every lie he crafted became a breadcrumb on a trail he didn't even realize he was leaving for me. The more he took, the more he revealed. The more he hid, the more he exposed. He wasn't just stealing. He was documenting his own downfall. And the more I uncovered, the more I realized something else. Something far more dangerous. The assets he wanted weren't simply assets. Some of them were tied to unpaid taxes. Some were linked to clients he overcharged. Some were connected to business deals he conducted off the books. Some were involved in liabilities he'd never disclosed. He wanted everything. Fine. He could have it. Because everything included consequences he didn't even know were attached. And while he was busy preparing to ruin me, I was preparing to let him walk straight into the trap he built for himself. The only person who didn't offer opinions, pity, or unsolicited advice after the courtroom incident was my son, Daniel. 19 years old, painfully observant, and far quieter than any teenager should be. While everyone else buzzed with panic and confusion, he watched. He listened. He noticed. Daniel had always been close to his father. Inseparable, really. Weekend fishing trips, late-night movie marathons, phone calls that lasted longer than necessary. Ethan loved showing him off, proudly declaring Daniel would take over the family business one day. And Daniel, being gentle and loyal, never questioned it. But in the weeks leading up to the divorce hearing, something changed in him. He grew distant, quiet, unsettled. At first, I thought he was simply overwhelmed with college applications and finishing his last semester of high school. But it was more than that. He avoided eye contact when Ethan spoke. He left the room when his father entered. He stopped going on their weekend outings without explanation. The night before the divorce hearing, he approached me hesitantly, almost as if he feared his own voice. "Mom," he said, hovering by my bedroom door, "can I ask you something?" I put down my paperwork. "Of course." He shifted uncomfortably, hands in his pockets. If someone you trust does something wrong, really wrong, would you tell someone? Or would you keep it quiet?" The question hit me like a cold gust. "What kind of wrong?" I asked carefully. He shook his head. "I can't say. Not yet." "Then how can I answer?" His eyes softened with something that looked like fear. I don't know what to do." He left before I could respond, closing the door softly behind him. I sat on my bed long after he disappeared down the hall, wondering what he had seen, what he had heard, and why he suddenly felt caught between us. The next morning at the courthouse, Daniel sat beside me. He didn't speak, didn't blink, didn't react to the judge's questions or Ethan's demands. But when I agreed to give his father everything, Daniel's jaw tightened so subtly most people would have missed it. But I didn't. And neither did Ethan. After the hearing, as Ethan celebrated his victory with a smug handshake to his lawyer, Daniel approached him. "Dad," he said quietly, "can we talk later?" Ethan barely glanced at him. "Not now. I'm busy." Daniel nodded once. It was a small gesture, but it carried a weight I didn't understand yet. That evening, while I sat sorting through documents, Daniel slipped into the kitchen. He stood there silently for a long moment before saying, "Mom, I think you should know something." I looked up, heart pounding. What is it? He swallowed hard. Dad isn't who you think he is. A beat. And I didn't want to believe it. But I heard things. I saw things. Things you need to know. His voice trembled, not from fear of me but fear of what he was about to reveal. That's when I realized. My son hadn't been silent because he didn't care. He'd been silent because he knew the truth. And he had been carrying it alone. Ethan didn't waste a single day after the hearing. The ink on the court documents was barely dry before he began parading around as if he were a self-made king reclaiming his throne. He stood in the driveway the next morning, arms crossed proudly, watching the moving truck pull up to the house like he'd just conquered foreign land. Two men hopped out, ready to pack everything he now believed belonged exclusively to him. Be careful with the dining table, he commanded loudly. It's custom made. It wasn't. We bought it on discount. But in his mind, everything he touched turned into gold. I watched from the sidewalk across the street, hands tucked into my jacket pockets, quietly invisible. He didn't know I was there. He didn't even look around. He was too busy giving orders, too busy bragging to the movers about his fresh start. He loaded the house with furniture like trophies. The leather sofa I saved 3 months for. The antique mirror from my grandmother. The artwork Daniel painted in 8th grade. He took it all. And he did it with the swagger of a man who believed he deserved even more. Before leaving, he sauntered into the front yard, keys dangling from his finger, and took a long, satisfied look at the house. Then he said something I'll never forget. This is going to be the start of something incredible. For him. Or for the consequences he didn't know he was dragging with him. By afternoon, he had moved into our home with his new girlfriend, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors like she owned them. She filmed short videos as she walked through the rooms, showing off her new life to her followers. Babe, she giggled, this house is perfect. Ethan puffed his chest. I told you. I always land on my feet. Boys. Not this time. In the following days he posted pictures online. A champagne bottle sitting on the kitchen counter. A panoramic shot of the living room. A selfie of him relaxing in the backyard hammock. The caption reading, "Success isn't owned. It's earned." I almost laughed. Because while he celebrated, I watched quietly from the background, noticing details he didn't. The cracks in the ceiling he never repaired. The pending maintenance notices he ignored. The tax papers he forgot to file. The business equipment purchased illegally through the company account. The utilities registered under the business name instead of personal. All the liabilities tied directly to the property he now claimed as his prize. He moved into his new life, proudly. But he had no idea he was also moving into the center of a storm he created himself. And soon, very soon, the first thunderclap would hit. The final day in court felt strangely quiet. Not the dramatic climax of a broken marriage, but the soft closing of a door I'd already walked through months earlier. Ethan strutted in wearing a new suit, the kind of flashy navy blue that screamed, "I'm winning." His girlfriend sat in the back row, legs crossed, smiling as if she were watching a movie where she already knew the ending. Everyone expected tension, drama, tears. Instead, the judge asked a few routine questions, confirmed the division of assets, and then stamped the final document with a heavy thud that echoed through the courtroom. "Do you acknowledge receipt of all awarded property, Mr. Carter?" she asked. Ethan lifted his chin. "Yes, Your Honor." "And you, Mrs. Carter, acknowledge relinquishing all claims?" I nodded. "Yes." Just like that, it was done. Ethan turned to his lawyer with a grin that stretched too wide, like a man who had just cheated fate and walked away untouched. He leaned back in his chair, whispering something smug. His lawyer forced a polite smile, though even he seemed uneasy with Ethan's overconfidence. My lawyer looked at me with concern. "Are you absolutely sure?" she whispered even as the court moved on to the next case. "You signed off on everything. You walked away from a life you built for 12 years. I straightened my papers calmly. "I know. But you're leaving with nothing," she added in a hushed voice. I smiled faintly. "Not nothing." I slid my fingers over the slim folder in my hands, the only thing I carried out of that courtroom. Thin enough to look insignificant. Light enough to tuck under my arm without notice. Harmless enough for Ethan to ignore entirely. But inside were 12 months of quietly gathered truths. Every questionable transaction. Every falsified invoice. Every tax discrepancy. Every whispered lie recorded in numbers. Every liability he thought was buried deep enough no one would find. I didn't need the house. I didn't need the cars. I didn't need the business accounts, furniture or memorabilia he ripped away from me with a smile. All I needed was the truth. And the truth fit neatly inside that folder. When I stood to leave, Ethan laughed under his breath. "Good luck starting over," he murmured loud enough for me to hear. "It won't be easy." I paused, turning back just long enough to meet his eyes. "Starting over isn't the hard part," I said softly. "Starting blind is." He frowned, confused. His confusion deepened when Daniel, our son, slipped from his seat a row behind me and followed me out the door without looking back at his father. Outside, the air was cool, the kind that feels like the universe taking a deep breath. Cars rolled by, the city hummed around us, and for the first time in a long while I felt weightless. Daniel touched my arm. "Mom," he said quietly, "you really gave him everything." I held up the folder. "Not everything. Just everything he asked for." He studied me with a seriousness far beyond 19. "What's in that?" "The beginning," I said. "Of the truth." He swallowed. "Does Dad know?" "He has no idea," I replied. And that was the most dangerous part. Because Ethan was so drunk on victory, so blinded by pride, that he walked out of the courtroom believing he had stolen my life. But what he actually walked away with was a ticking bomb he didn't even know he was carrying. Daniel didn't speak right away after we left the courthouse. We sat in the parking lot for several minutes, the soft hum of passing traffic filling the silence between us. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles turned white. I could feel the storm inside him, the weight he'd been carrying for far too long. Finally he whispered, "Mom, I should have told you earlier." I turned to him gently. "Told me what?" He swallowed hard, his throat bobbing as if the truth itself was too heavy to release. "Dad thinks I'm on his side," he said. "He thinks I don't notice anything. But I've seen more than he knows." My breath caught. "Daniel, what did you see?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead he reached into his backpack and pulled out a small notebook, worn, pages sticking up at odd angles, corners bent. He placed it in my hands. "I started writing things down months ago," he said quietly. "Things that didn't feel right." I opened the notebook slowly. Inside were dates, times, short notes written in his neat handwriting. Dad took cash from office safe again. He said it was for payroll, but payroll already processed. Why is he meeting Mr. Lasker at night? Isn't he under investigation? Dad told me not to tell you about the new account. He said it's for emergencies, but he keeps making big transfers. My chest tightened. "Daniel, why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want to believe it," he whispered. "I kept telling myself Dad wouldn't do anything wrong. But then He stopped, his voice cracking. "Mom, I heard him. One day he was arguing on the phone in the garage. He didn't know I was there. He was talking about how he moved the money before anyone could catch it, and how the paperwork would hide everything. He said once the divorce was done, you'd never see a single dollar again." I closed my eyes, gripping the notebook harder. Ethan had always underestimated our son, believing him too young, too naive to notice the shadows gathering around him. Daniel wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "And then, there's more." He hesitated, then pulled out a second item from his backpack. A USB drive. "What's this?" I asked. I copied files from his office computer. His voice shook, but he continued anyway, courage building with each word. Invoices he changed. Fake expenses he created. Messages with people I don't think he should be involved with. I didn't know what to do, so I saved everything. My heart broke and swelled at the same time. He had been protecting me. Quietly. Silently. Alone. I reached for his hand. "Daniel, you shouldn't have had to carry this." He finally met my eyes, tears brimming. "I didn't want him to hurt you, Mom. But I didn't want to lose him either." "You're not losing anyone," I said softly. "But you did the right thing." His voice trembled as he whispered, "So, what happens now?" I closed the notebook gently. "Now," I said, "we stop letting him write the story." And for the first time Daniel nodded with certainty. The night Daniel handed me the notebook and USB drive, something inside me shifted. Not anger. Not vengeance. Not even heartbreak. It was clarity. For months I had suspected Ethan was hiding things. The late nights. The altered receipts. The missing funds. The secrecy. The sudden arrogance. Everything pointed toward deception. But suspicion wasn't enough. Not for the courts. Not for the IRS. Not for anyone who could hold him accountable. I needed proof. And now I had it. Daniel went to bed early, emotionally drained. I stayed up long after midnight, sitting at my small kitchen table with the thin folder I had walked out of the courthouse with. I opened it beside Daniel's notebook, the USB drive glinting under the dim light. Inside the folder were the documents I had been compiling for nearly a year. Bank statements showing irregular transfers. Copies of invoices that didn't match company records. Emails with suspicious attachments. Tax forms with gaps and inconsistencies. Property maintenance notices Ethan had ignored. And a list of equipment purchased illegally using business funds. I hadn't planned revenge. I had planned survival. When I first noticed the missing funds, I'd quietly started tracking every transaction, storing copies in encrypted files. I spoke with a forensic lawyer discreetly, asking hypothetical questions. I met with a tax consultant under the guise of preparing for future business opportunities. I studied the contracts Ethan had signed, highlighting every clause he violated without realizing it. Every night while he thought I was asleep, I built the foundation of a truth he never imagined I'd uncover. But the moment I realized he not only intended to leave me but intended to destroy me financially, that was when my plan changed. That was when I stopped documenting and started preparing. I organized everything chronologically. I cross-referenced statements from our business accounts with his personal withdrawals. I traced money he claimed was used for supplies to a private account he never disclosed. I printed every digital file and marked each one with notes. Ethan thought I was the quiet, obedient wife who cried in private and avoided confrontation. He didn't know the woman he married had once built fraud cases from scratches of data. He didn't know I could read financial patterns like a language. He didn't know every lie he told left a trail only someone like me would recognize. When dawn finally broke, the sunlight spilled across the table, illuminating the stacks of evidence. I gathered the papers into the folder, smoothing each page as if preparing a gift. Because that's exactly what it was. A gift he had unknowingly given me with every poorly hidden lie. And now for the first time, I was ready to use it. I didn't go to sleep that night. While the world rested, I sat at the kitchen table with Daniel's notebook, the USB drive, and my own year-long collection of secrets. A quiet hum filled the house, part refrigerator, part fate inching closer. By sunrise, my decision was made. At 9:04 a.m., I walked into the county administrative building, the same place Ethan had filed for divorce 6 months earlier. The same hallways he strutted through, convinced he was outsmarting everyone. But today I wasn't here to lose anything. I was here to submit something. I approached the counter, the clerk barely glancing up from her computer. "How can I help you?" she asked. I placed the thin folder on the counter. "I need to submit an official report." She nodded, reaching for a form. "What kind? Financial? Property-related? Business compliance?" A slow, calm breath escaped my lips. "All of the above." Her fingers paused over the keyboard. "All of the above?" "Yes," I said. "And it needs to go to the Financial Crimes Division, the State Tax Board, and Family Court." Simultaneously. She blinked, finally looking up. "That's unusual." "I know," I replied softly. "But it's necessary." She took the folder and opened it. Inside were copies of invoices Ethan forged, bank statements showing unreported income, transfers to hidden accounts, falsified deductions, illegally categorized business purchases, copies of threatening messages he sent suppliers, emails with his accountant discussing temporary adjustments, records of property neglect that violated city codes, photographs of equipment purchased through the business but delivered to his private storage unit, and tax forms with inconsistencies screaming for an audit. Layer by layer, it exposed the truth Ethan had buried beneath arrogance and carelessness. The clerk's face slowly shifted from polite indifference to stunned seriousness. She called someone from the back office. Then another. Soon, 3 officials stood over the counter, whispering to one another, flipping through pages with widening eyes. Finally, one of them, A stern-looking woman with silver glasses turned to me. "Ma'am," she said, voice low and calm, "do you understand what you're filing here?" I nodded. "I do. This could trigger multiple investigations." "I know. These are serious violations." "Yes." She studied me for a long moment. "Why now?" I met her gaze without flinching. "Because up until yesterday I didn't legally own any of it." "No. He does. All of it." She inhaled sharply, realization dawning. "You're saying he requested full ownership of this?" "Yes," I said. "Every property, every asset, every account, every liability." "Does he know what he signed for?" A faint smile touched my lips. "No. He has no idea." The official exchanged looks with her colleagues. "We'll file this immediately," she said. "Expect follow-up within a few days." I thanked her and turned to leave, but she called after me. "One more question," she said. "Why didn't you keep the assets? You could have protected yourself." I paused at the doorway. "I didn't want the assets," I replied. "I wanted the truth attached to them." Out in the parking lot, I finally exhaled. The morning sun warmed my face, and for the first time in months, the air felt light, almost weightless. I had delivered the truth to the people who knew exactly what to do with it. Sooner than Ethan ever expected. The consequences would begin. He wanted everything. Now he had everything, including every single thing he never should have touched. It started with a letter. A plain white envelope taped to Ethan's front door. No warning. No knock. No explanation. Just a quiet message waiting for him when he strutted outside to retrieve the morning paper like the king of his newly claimed castle. He ripped it open casually. And froze. State Tax Board, Notice of Audit. Within minutes he received a second letter. This one delivered by a courier with a serious face and no small talk. Financial Crimes Division, request for documentation. Immediate. By noon 2 more arrived. Property Code Enforcement. Violations detected. Inspection required. Business Licensing Department. Compliance review scheduled. His girlfriend filmed him pacing the living room, hissing into the camera, "I don't know why he's so stressed. It's probably just a mistake." But it wasn't a mistake. It was the beginning. Within 24 hours, every thread he'd pulled loose over the past year began unraveling at once. First, the tax board demanded receipts for deductions he'd claimed, repairs, equipment purchases, employee bonuses, that didn't match payroll records. Each missing paper tightened the noose he didn't know he'd tied around himself. Next, property inspectors arrived unannounced. They pointed out structural cracks, unfinished electrical work, faulty plumbing, all issues he had ignored for years. Repairs would cost thousands, fines even more. Then came the call from his business partner. "Ethan, what the hell did you submit last quarter? We have discrepancies everywhere. Investors are panicking." Ethan stammered excuses, blaming software glitches, clerical errors. Anything except the truth. But no one believed him. Not when the numbers were so messy. Not when records showed purchases made under the business account but shipped to a private address. His girlfriend's voice turned sharp. "You told me you were financially stable. You told me everything was clean." He snapped at her, frustration boiling. I don't know what's happening." But he did know. Deep down he knew exactly what was happening. Because this wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. This was a chain reaction he unknowingly triggered the moment he demanded everything. Still, he clung to denial until the phone call that shattered it completely. An IRS agent left a voicemail. "Mr. Carter, we require clarification on several unreported income sources. Failure to respond within 5 business days will escalate the inquiry." His hands trembled as he replayed the message, as if the words might change. His glamorous new life suddenly cramped around him like a shrinking cage. That night, Daniel told me he had checked his father's social media. "Mom," he said quietly, "he deleted all the victory posts." I nodded. Of course he did. The celebration couldn't survive the truth. Back at Ethan's house, his girlfriend packed her bags loudly, slamming drawers, yelling accusations about being lied to and dragged into legal messes. He tried to stop her. She shoved past him. "I'm not going down with you," she spat before slamming the door behind her. Silence filled the house he had stolen. Silence, and the first true realization. He hadn't won anything. He had inherited chaos. And it was only the beginning. 3 days after the first wave of letters, the storm fully reached Ethan's doorstep. It was early morning when the knock came, 3 sharp raps that echoed through the house like a warning bell. He shuffled to the front door, bleary-eyed from another sleepless night spent sorting through receipts, bank statements, and frantic texts to his accountant. A man in a dark suit stood waiting, holding a thick envelope. "Mr. Carter?" the man asked. Ethan nodded. "You've been served." He dropped the envelope into Ethan's shaking hands, turned, and walked away with the efficiency of someone who had delivered bad news many times before. Ethan tore it open on the spot. Civil fraud investigation notice. Failure to respond will result in prosecution. His breath hitched. By the time he reached the kitchen, he was already ripping open the next envelope that had been pushed through the mail slot. Business misconduct hearing. Mandatory appearance. He stumbled backward, gripping the counter for balance. The house, once his trophy, felt like it was swallowing him. Another envelope slid under the door. He snatched it up with trembling fingers. Court summons. Breach of contract, unlawful transactions, failure to disclose assets. A strangled sound escaped him, not quite a gasp, not quite a cry. More like the first crack in a collapsing facade. He dropped into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "This can't be happening," he whispered into the quiet room. But it was happening. Every hidden mistake. Every lie. Every fraudulent move. Every corner he had cut. Every shortcut he thought would never be traced. All of it was surfacing, neatly packaged into official documents demanding explanations he didn't have. His phone buzzed on the table. He snatched it, hoping, praying, it was some kind of clarification or apology or miracle. It was his accountant. "Ethan, the numbers don't match anything you told me. I can't cover this up. The authorities contacted me this morning. You need a criminal lawyer." Ethan's stomach twisted. "A criminal lawyer?" he repeated aloud as if saying it would make it less real. Then another message popped up. This one from Daniel. "Dad, we need to talk." Ethan's entire body went cold. A new kind of fear crept into him. Fear of what his own son might know. Fear of what Daniel might say. Fear of who he might believe. He texted back shakily. "What do you mean? Talk about what?" No reply came. Not yet. He pushed himself out of the chair and paced the room, breathing hard. It was only then, standing in the ruins of the empire he thought he built, that he realized the horrifying truth. He hadn't just taken assets. He had taken responsibilities, liabilities, evidence, everything tied to every mistake he had made. It wasn't revenge. It was accountability. And he had walked straight into it. Ethan arrived at his lawyer's office looking like a shadow of the man who once stood in court, boasting about his fresh start. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, and he clutched a stack of official notices so tightly that the edges had curled under his grip. The receptionist led him into a conference room, offering a sympathetic smile he was too frantic to appreciate. His attorney, Mr. Holbrook, a polished man who usually projected impenetrable confidence, entered with a legal pad in hand. "Ethan," he began pleasantly, "you mentioned something urgent on the phone." Ethan slammed the stack of envelopes onto the table. "Fix this," he demanded. "Every department in the state is suddenly after me. Taxes, business compliance, financial crimes. This is insane." Holbrook raised an eyebrow, adjusting his glasses. He opened the top envelope and skimmed it. Then the second. Then the third. With each one, the color drained from his face. "Ethan," he said slowly, "where did these come from?" "My mailbox. My door. They're swarming me." Ethan snapped. "But they're wrong. I didn't do anything illegal." Holbrook set the papers down, pressing his fingertips to his forehead. "These aren't random checks. These are targeted inquiries based on submitted evidence." "Evidence?" Ethan echoed. "What evidence?" Holbrook's silence was heavier than words. Finally he exhaled. "Someone filed documentation connecting you to financial misconduct. Fraud. Tax evasion. Misappropriation of business funds. Property negligence. Breach of contract." "That's impossible." Ethan barked. "I didn't file anything." Holbrook looked him dead in the eyes. "But your wife did." Ethan stumbled back. No, she didn't take anything." She left with nothing. Except, Holbrook said carefully, she must have left with what mattered. Ethan shook his head violently. She gave me the house. She gave me the business. She gave me every account. That, Holbrook replied, is exactly the problem. He pulled out the divorce decree and tapped one line with his pen. You insisted on full responsibility for every asset. So what? Ethan snapped. Holbrook leaned forward, voice low and grave. Ownership isn't just rights. Ownership is liability. Ethan blinked. What does that even mean? It means every fraudulent invoice is now yours. Every improper purchase is yours. Every unreported dollar belongs to you. Every safety violation on the property is your responsibility. Every illegal deduction falls on you. Every missing record is your burden to explain. The room fell silent. Ethan's breathing turned shallow. But she knew. Yes, Holbrook said. She knew. She let you take everything because everything is now tied to your name. It hit him then. The realization. The one he had walked into smiling. What do I do? He whispered, voice cracking. Holbrook didn't offer comfort. Instead he slid over a card with a phone number scribbled on the back. You'll need to hire a criminal defense attorney. Immediately. Ethan stared at the card, numb. His victory had turned to ash. And for the first time he understood. He hadn't been outsmarting her. He had been digging his own grave. The morning after Ethan's world began collapsing, I woke up before the sun. The house I was renting was small. Just 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with cabinets that squeaked. But it was peaceful. It smelled like fresh paint and possibility. There were no ghosts of arguments, no slammed doors, no reminders of broken promises. Just me. Just Daniel. Just a quiet beginning. I made coffee and stepped onto the tiny porch, watching the sky shift from gray to golden. It struck me how long it had been since I'd watched a sunrise without feeling dread in my chest. For a moment I simply breathed, deep, full and free. Daniel joined me, hair tousled, still half asleep. Mom, he murmured, are you okay? I smiled. Better than okay. He sat beside me, pulling his knees to his chest. Dad called last night, he said carefully. He didn't say much. Just asked if I knew where you were. Did you tell him? No, Daniel stared ahead. I don't think he's ready to hear my voice right now. There was pain in his tone, real raw pain but also clarity. My son wasn't choosing sides out of spite. He was choosing truth, maturity and self-preservation. He'll figure things out eventually, I said softly. Daniel nodded. I just don't want him to drag us down with him. He won't, I assured him. Not anymore. By noon I visited my new office. A modest space inside a refurbished brick building downtown. Sunlight poured across the desk I'd assembled the night before. A small sign on the door read, Carter Financial Restoration, helping women rebuild their futures. It felt surreal. For 12 years, I'd put my dreams aside to support a man who never planned to support me. And now here I was, rebuilding not for him but for myself. The first client walked in before I'd even finished unpacking. A middle-aged woman with shaking hands and a marriage that looked too much like mine once had. She needed help untangling finances her husband had hidden from her. I listened, took notes and guided her gently through her fears. When she left, she hugged me tightly. You have no idea how much hope you gave me, she whispered. But I did know. Because I had once needed the same hope. That evening, Daniel and I cooked dinner together in our little kitchen. Laughter filled the room. Real laughter, not the careful, controlled kind I used to force in the old house. We ate on mismatched plates, sitting on chairs we'd assembled ourselves. Freedom didn't look glamorous. It didn't look expensive. It didn't look like victory on social media. It looked like peace. It looked like starting over without fear. It looked like a future I finally chose for myself. And as night settled around us, I realized something profound. I hadn't lost anything. I had gained everything that mattered. The call came 2 weeks later. I was in my office, reviewing a client's financial documents, when my phone buzzed with a number I recognized instantly, Ethan's. For a moment my chest tightened. Not with fear. Not with anger. But with the kind of calm that comes from knowing you can finally face something without losing yourself. I let it ring twice before answering. He didn't speak at first. All I heard was uneven breathing, the kind that comes from a man trying, and failing, to control the collapse inside him. "Are you there?" he finally managed. "Yes," I said gently. Another long silence. I imagined him sitting in that big house, the one he had fought so hard for, surrounded by bills he couldn't pay, letters he couldn't answer, and consequences he couldn't outrun. "Everything's falling apart," he whispered. "The audits, the inspections, the lawsuits. I don't know what to do." There was desperation in his voice, raw, trembling desperation. For a moment I closed my eyes. I remembered the man he used to be, the man who promised me the world, who held me through storms, who celebrated our son's first steps with tears in his eyes. But I also remembered the man he became, the liar, the manipulator, the one who weaponized love like a bargaining chip. "What do you want from me, Ethan?" I asked softly. He exhaled shakily. "Help. I want." His voice cracked. "I want you to help me." I swallowed. "Ethan, I don't have the power to undo what you've done." "You knew," he snapped suddenly, panic morphing into anger. "You knew what those assets were tied to. You knew what would happen." "Yes," I answered calmly. "I knew." "Why didn't you warn me?" he demanded. This time my voice didn't shake. "Because every warning I gave you for years you ignored. You didn't want a partner. You wanted control. And when you asked for everything, you meant it." He fell silent again, but this silence felt heavier, like reality finally sinking into his bones. "I thought you'd fight me," he whispered. "I thought you'd beg to keep the house, the money, the business." "You thought wrong," I said. "I wasn't afraid of losing things. I was afraid of losing myself." He exhaled, defeated. "So what did you take? If you didn't want the house, or the business, or anything, what did you take?" For the first time I smiled, not in victory but in truth. "Freedom," I said. "I took my freedom." There was a soft, broken laugh on the other end of the line, one that didn't sound like triumph but surrender. "I ruined everything," he whispered. "No," I corrected gently. "You did exactly what you wanted. You took it all. You just didn't know what all really included." He didn't argue. He didn't blame. He didn't plead. He simply breathed, a slow, defeated breath that felt like the end of a chapter neither of us ever expected to write. When the call ended, I sat quietly for a moment, letting the weight of everything settle around me. Not guilt. Not regret. Closure. Real final closure. That evening, Daniel and I walked to a small hill overlooking the city. Lights flickered across rooftops, the world humming softly beneath us. He nudged my shoulder. "You look happy," he said. "I am," I replied. "Even after everything?" I wrapped an arm around him. "Especially after everything." Because I finally understood something powerful. Ethan had taken the past, but I had taken the future. My future. My peace. My freedom. And for the first time in years I wasn't surviving. I was living. Truly, beautifully living.